Daily Item reporter Rick Dandes recently interviewed astronaut Jim Lovell over the phone for the final installment of the Daily Items 1968 series.
First of all, again, thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me for a few minutes.
Fine. If anything I can give you to help you, let me know. This is all old news now, you know.
Well, I'm doing a series on 1968, and it was such a tumultuous year. And I think that what you did and Frank Borman and that crew uh, really gave everybody a sense of hope at the end of the year. It was a very positive thing. Could you give me your recollections of that whole space shot around the moon?
Well, we were so involved in getting the spacecraft ready during the latter part of 1968 that we were sort of divorced from the trauma and all that was going on with the country. We knew, of course, all about the war in Vietnam, being military people, and we knew about the riots in the schools and the streets of the young people, and all the questionable things that we were doing. And but we were so interested in a particular project, and the fact of the unfolding of the problems with NASA in that year, and then we were going to be an Earth orbital flight, and then we couldn't get the lunar module ready, and we also had intelligence information about the Russian attempt to put people around the moon in late 1968. And so we changed our mission completely, which sort of kept us pretty much involved. I had to learn the navigation all over again, not just Earth orbital, which was nothing compared to navigating newly to go to go out to space and into the moon. So things were, for at least for the small contingent of NASA, the three of us, was pretty well focused on one object.
Jim, so how far in advance did you find out about the change in plans?
Well, two of us were, well, actually three of us were all in California working on the spacecraft, the Apollo vehicle that was going to go around Earth orbit, and we were there helping the engineers and the company do some of the testing and learning some of the systems ourselves. When NASA called Frank Borman back to Houston, and there he was told about the project to change the mission to a lunar flight rather than Earth orbital flight. And then he came back and told us, and so we all headed back to Houston to renew our efforts in a different way.
That must have I don't know. I know you were certainly one of the astronauts, and you that was the mission. But were you excited about the idea of orbiting the moon?
Yes, to me, this was a tremendous, change. I'm sort of the type that I'm a little true, but I thought, this was exploration at its finest. This was another Lewis, for the flying, the early exploration of the United States.
Yeah, Lewis and Clark. Yeah.
Yeah, Lewis and Clark expedition. And I know Frank was very worried. His objective, when he heard about it, was merely to beat the Russians. And he wanted at first just to go around the moon, circumnavigate. That's what the Russians were planning on doing.
Yeah.
We found out later on, of course. And that would have not accomplished much because we could have done that with an unmanned spacecraft. But he was persuaded that no, we can't do that. We got to go around and orbit the moon so we get some idea of some of the lunar characteristics as far as the concentration of the mass and whether the gravity might be changed a little bit. And then he didn't want to have any cameras on board. Can you imagine doing that without a camera? That could be. But anyway, we persuaded him to make this a regular flight with doing as much as possible to get ready for the landing.
Jim, if you will, take me through the actual flight. I mean, you've actually seen the moon up close, which is very few people can say.
Well, yes. Of course, there's a new book out now that you might have heard about or read by Robert Curson on the flight of Apollo 8, and it was quite accurate. But the three of us started working at the various functions that we had to do, and basically the navigation. I went to MIT to learn some of the new stuff that they had developed for the flight, and we got everything all squared away, and I was looking forward to it all the time, and I knew that there was some idea of what the chances of success were. That someone had come up with about 50%. Well, I looked at that 50% as not accomplishing our objectives, not to be lost in space or something like that. But a screenwriter couldn't have developed a better scenario. Here it is at the end of 1968, a very bad year, and three of us circled the moon on Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
We were trying to think of what to say, and we couldn't come up with anything. And Frank talked to the NASA PR, they couldn't come up, and then one of the people in NASA PR had a good friend who was a newspaper reporter, and he came up with it. Actually, his wife mentioned to him to read the first 10 verses of Genesis in the Old Testament. And that's how that happened. And Frank might give you a better view on that than I can.
Yeah, I have made a request to talk to Frank as well. Jim, were there any moments that you were concerned about your safety up there, or did things run pretty smoothly?
Actually, around the spacecraft, and being an early model, thinking that there might be some glitches in it, something wouldn't work or something like that. The Apollo 8 spacecraft was really fantastic, and it was very good. And the fact that, of course, we didn't have a lunar module, because as we knew later on in Apollo 13, it was the lunar module that saved us.
Yeah.
And of course, for the other flights, if something happened, they had a lunar module. But Apollo 8 did not. I never thought about that being a concern. Never dawned on me, not to have a lunar module. And it was, to me, it was probably the highlight of my space experience, because it was a chance to view the Earth from 240,000 miles. And, I suddenly got a new perspective on, not just on the flight of Apollo 8, but on life itself, because I could put my thumb up to the window and hide the little blue and white ball called Earth.
Wow.
And I thought that behind my thumb were about 5 billion individuals all trying to strive on that little ball, plus everything I ever knew was behind my thumb. And so I got to think about the philosophy of that whole event.
And Jim, when you circled around the moon and when you were on the other side of the moon, that must have been a strange feeling. How close did you actually get to the surface? Do you know?
Well, yes, we finally orbited the moon as we came around to about 60 nautical miles. So we were there for about 9 orbits and looked at the moon, looked at the fact that the far side had a lot smaller craters in none of the large mare, or the seas, that the front side had, which meant, probably due to the gravitational pull between the two bodies, at least at the formation of the moon.
About how many days was the flight?
Well, we took off on the 21st and came back on the 27th, I think.
I guess at that point you would land in the ocean, right?
Oh, yes, we landed in the Pacific Ocean. That was the criteria, or the where all the Apollo lunar flights landed.
I mean, Tom Hanks kind of made you guys famous with that Apollo 13.
Apollo 13 is an entirely different flight. It was normal up until about April 13th, and about 200,000 miles out when the oxygen tank exploded, and we had to then figure out how to get back home again. And we did that with the help of Mission Control. Fortunately, we had communication. And the lunar module, which was utilized in an entirely different way, but was successful and just had enough consumables, oxygen and electrical power to get us back.
Jim, in all, how many space flights did you were you on?
I made 4. I had 2 Gemini flights, Gemini 7, Gemini 12, Apollo 8, and Apollo 13.
And a personal question, I hope you're doing well. I hope you're feeling okay.
Well, I'm 90 years old, and I'm still living, so
and,
sense of something.
And what do you think about what's going on now with NASA and the space station?
Well, I think that NASA's a little bit like a ship without a rudder. Of course, we have that space station, which we spent about, the cost of the station was probably about 2/3 of our cost, and yet we're paying the Russians now to send one of our astronauts up in their spacecraft to the station. I don't know what the future of that station is. I don't think it's really contributing much to the overall science of space flight or looking back at the Earth and learning too much more about the Earth than we need. As far as the future of our space program goes, I've always advocated going back to the moon. We've barely touched the surface of the moon. And by going back and expanding our investigation of the moon, or exploration, we can also build up confidence and also design and build new infrastructure to do that, to make ourselves very reliable and very confident that we could spend longer times on the moon, and that would then be forwarded and could be expanded into finally going to Mars. I don't believe that some of the talk about going to Mars in the next 10 or 15 years is correct, because I wasn't right about going to the moon so quickly. And I thought that was going to take longer, but with the Mars trip, there's a lot of unknowns still to be done. And actually, when you think about it, we know more about the Martian surface today than Neil Armstrong knew about the moon surface.
Jim, it's been an honor speaking to you. Thank you so much for giving me 15 minutes of your time.
Okay, well, lots of luck to you.
Okay, thank you.